There are certain clarifying moments in political discourse, moments that demonstrate just where the various parties stand. Never has the gap been so obvious as this last week. On Friday, the left declared the world was in imminent peril. The problem? President Trump pulled out of the altogether meaningless Paris Climate Accord, a worldwide agreement requesting non-binding commitments from signatories about future carbon emissions cuts. The hysteria was palpable. Suddenly, debunked weather prognosticator Al Gore found himself in prime television slots jabbering about the end of the world. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, she gabbled about how Trump was dishonoring God. No word on her abortion-on-demand position from the Holy One, blessed be he. The Huffington Post ran a headline showing the world in flames. The mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, released a statement bemoaning Trump's decision. Meanwhile, the right shrugged. It pointed out the agreement didn't really do much anyway. It didn't bind China and India to any serious commitments. The Senate had not passed any enabling legislation. Perhaps non-governmental alternatives should be considered before diving headlong into empowerment of the regulatory state to fight a rising temperature over the next century. On Saturday, a group of Islamic terrorists drove a van into a crowd on London Bridge and then jumped out of the vehicle and started stabbing people in surrounding establishments. ISIS claimed responsibility. The right immediately labeled the attacks yet another example of Islamic extremism on the march, linking them with the Manchester terror attack. President Trump took to Twitter to denounce the terror attacks and call for an end to politically correct policies, as well as to stump for his travel ban. Conservatives on both sides of the Atlantic complained about leftist multiculturalism creating room for Islamic terror growth. Meanwhile, the left shrugged. Sally Cohn tweeted about the glories of political correctness. Paul Krugman compared being killed in a terrorist attack to being killed by a drunk driver. Democrats complained about President Trump's attacks on Khan, who was busy urging Londoners to stay calm after panicking about global warming just a few days ago. What explains this gap between left and right? The left believes that human beings are inherently good, and that only environment defines whether they will act in evil fashion. That's why Senator Bernie Sanders articulated in 2016 that global warming was the spur to terrorism. It's why the Obama administration routinely suggested that poverty causes terrorism. External circumstances dictate the morality of individual actors. That's also why the left argues we shouldn't hold people responsible for their actions as a general rule. Instead, we should reshape society. The right, on the other hand, believes that human beings are capable of evil all on their own. That's why they see the rise of radical Islam as more of a problem than global warming. Good people won't kill each other just because the world is getting warmer. They will if they begin to believe evil ideologies or support those who do. The gap is not bridgeable. It goes to the nature of humanity and our perception of that nature. But it's requiring a greater and greater strain these days to blame anybody but individual human beings in free Western societies for their own descent into evil. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. All right, tons to get to today. I want to talk about what we really should be talking about, and then I want to talk about what the media is instead talking about. Of course, these Comey hearings, and then NSA head Mike Rogers is in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, as well as Dan Coats, the Director of National Intelligence, both of them testifying right now. We'll get to all of that and bring you the latest updates. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors over at ProFlowers. So I've been using ProFlowers for years, long before they were a sponsor. Whenever I go out of town, I try to send my wife flowers from abroad, and ProFlowers is the way that I do it. They always send fresh flowers. It's always great. Whenever there's an issue, they make it right immediately. We had a broken vase one time, and they sent a brand new vase right then and there. Right now, ProFlowers has a special offer just for our listeners. You get $10 off your purchase of $29 or more. This deal works best on best-selling gifts like their 100 Blooms bouquet, a dozen red roses, or even their totally unique plant gifts. To get that great deal, go to proflowers.com right now and enter Ben Show at checkout. That's Ben Show at checkout. ProFlowers bouquets, they're guaranteed fresh for 7 days, or they'll refund all of your money. They have a 7-step quality check, which means that the flowers are always awesome, and their website is really easy to use. You can schedule your delivery ahead of time for any date you want and get back to that day. ProFlowers is a no-brainer gift for a birthday, for an anniversary, for Father's Day, which is coming up, every occasion or no occasion at all. ProFlowers, just fantastic. I use it. It's made my marriage better because when you show love, then your spouse shows love to you as well. ProFlowers.com, promo code BENSHOW, $10 off any purchase of $29 or more, so significant discount there. Plus, if you use the promo code BENSHOW, they know that we sent you, which means they continue advertising with us, which means we can continue to bring you the show. So BENSHOW, and go to ProFlowers.com to use that promo code BENSHOW. Get that $10 off for any purchase of $29 or more. Okay, so let's start with what people should be talking about today. What people should be talking about today is there is a global threat of Islamic terror. There was an Islamic terror attack in Canada over the weekend. Everybody ignored it. There was an Islamic terror attack. ISIS actually is now basically at war with Iran, and Iran is now blaming Saudi Arabia. So the chances of a Middle Eastern conflagration are growing exponentially. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is in the middle of a firefight a political firefight anyway, with the nation of Qatar. Qatar is a backdoor terror supporter, and they have been for a long time, and now Saudi Arabia is posing itself in opposition to them. So things are shaping up for what could actually turn into a hot conflict in the Middle East between Iran and Saudi Arabia, or Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Things could get very ugly very quickly over there. And meanwhile, all of that is resulting in an increase in terror abroad. ISIS is trying to demonstrate that it still has muscle. So there have been terrorist attacks, as I say, in Britain, in Toronto. There's one in the Philippines. And the London mayor was asked by I think it's by Piers Morgan, actually, what exactly he's doing to stop terrorism. And basically said, we can't do much.
Mayor of this capital city, where are they?
I can't follow 400 people. What I can do is make sure the policies, because what we can do though is make sure that the resources for the police and the experts to follow these people.
Why can't you instruct the police? Why can't you call Cressida Dick right now and say every one of those people who's come back from a war zone, who's in London, I want them followed?
And he has no answer for that. He starts to kind of futz about. The answer is that he can, but he won't, because the fact is we are deploying our law enforcement resources in the West in exactly the wrong way. We have used politically correct ways of doing it. You know, people wonder why it is that the intelligence community has these blanket surveillance tools that they use for all Americans. One of the reasons is political correctness. If we weren't politically correct, then we'd be using all of our law enforcement resources at the hottest spots. We still are using a disproportionate amount, but we have to pretend that we're not. So instead, we decide it's more important to surveil everyone equally. And so we have these giant metadata programs instead of focusing in on, say, people who are coming back from Syria or people who are going to Wahhabi-funded mosques, Saudi-funded mosques. It's a huge mistake. Meanwhile, Democrats, of course, are not focusing on the threat of Islamic terror at all. They are trying to continue to play identity politics. They're trying to say that Republicans are evil and terrible, not because Republicans are bad at protecting you from terrorism. They're evil and terrible because they're racist and sexist and bigoted and homophobic. So Andrew Cuomo, who's the governor of New York, who should theoretically be spending a lot of his time focused on the terror threat to places like New York City, instead, he's spending his time preparing for a 2020 run by going around saying that President Trump hates immigrants and just wants to deport people, so he should deport Andrew Cuomo.
You want to deport immigrants? Start with me, because I'm an immigrant.
Well, if only we could, Andrew Cuomo, but you're an American citizen, so we cannot do that, nor should we. But it is tempting. The fact is that the Democrats are seeking to avoid the real discussion, which is what do we do about radical Islamic terror? What they are really wanting to focus on is, of course, these hearings that are happening on the Hill right now. So there are a bunch of breaking pieces of news last night surrounding James Comey, the former FBI director, and President Trump. And the big question from all of this, because today, as I say, we have the National Security Advisor, the head of the National Security Agency, rather, Mike Rogers, testifying on the Hill. There were reports that Rogers had been asked by Trump to pressure Comey to drop the Trump-Russia investigation into Flynn. There was also a report that Trump had asked Dan Coats, who's the head of the Director of National Intelligence, to pressure Comey to back off of Mike Flynn, the former National Security Advisor. And those reports are all coming out in the last couple of weeks. They are testifying today on the Hill. You also have Comey himself is testifying on the Hill tomorrow. So I want to bring you all the updates about this. But the only question that matters here, the only question that really matters is, did President Trump in any way attempt to hamper the investigation into Trump campaign Russia connections? Did he attempt? That's the big question in all of this. Did he attempt to do that? Did he attempt to pressure Coates? Did he attempt to pressure Rogers? Did he attempt to pressure Jeff Sessions? Did he attempt to pressure Comey before he fired him? Was any of this designed to actually shut down the investigation? Now, if you're on the left, you got to be saying, well, sure, of course. I mean, it looks like now, according to these reports, he asked Coates to tell Comey to back off. He asked Rogers to tell Comey to back off. He asked Coates to disown the Russian dossier we talked about several months ago, this intelligence dossier about Trump and Russia, much of which turned out to be false, and Coates refused to do it. He fired Comey. If you're on the left, you have to be saying, well, yeah, I mean, there's pressure everywhere. And to be fair, if the situation were reversed, if you had Barack Obama and Barack Obama's IRS head were being investigated, and she went up and she testified that Barack Obama did not put any pressure, and he had some secret conversations with her, and there are reports that he had asked her to target 501c3 charities. And the question was, did he pressure you to push 501c3 charities that were conservative out the back door? We would all be saying, well, why would we trust her answer? That's what the left is saying today. But again, no evidence of any of this, no evidence of serious pressure being brought. Everyone has testified now. According to Rogers today, he just testified moments ago that he has not felt pressure from the Trump administration to do anything illegal. Coates said basically the same thing. They're giving a little bit shifty answers in some areas. They're saying things like, I feel it's inappropriate to answer. I don't know if I legally can answer. But regardless of that, there's still no evidence that Trump actually pressured. So there's two ways of reading Trump's behavior in all of this. And I want to go through what the reports are about Trump's behavior, and then I'll explain the two reads on the behavior. So the Washington Post reported last night, this is all in prep run up for the Comey hearing. The Comey hearing tomorrow is what Democrats are looking forward to. They think that Comey's going to come forward, and Comey is going to say the following. He's going to get up, and he's going to say, President Trump met with me. He asked me to kill the Trump-Russia investigation. I refused to do so. He fired me. That's the narrative Democrats are hoping for. That's not the narrative they're likely to get. But in preparation for that narrative, the bars in D.C. are opening up tomorrow, apparently, and they're putting the Comey hearings on TV. CBS is broadcasting it in network time, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is just insane. Would they have broadcast Lois Lerner's testimony on network time? Would they have broadcast Eric Holder's testimony on network time? Would they have broadcast Hillary Clinton's Benghazi testimony on network time? Of course not. This is evidence of tremendous, tremendous media bias. But the media are all hot and bothered about this, so they're leaking incessantly about Comey and about Coates and about Rogers and about all of this. So here's the Washington Post report last night. They say, quote, the president complained he met with CIA Director Mike Pompeo and DNI Dan Coates. They attended a briefing at the White House. He pulled them aside and told everybody else to leave. And then, quote, the president started complaining about the FBI investigation and Comey's handling of it, said officials familiar with the account Coates gave to associates. 2 days earlier, Comey had confirmed in a congressional hearing the Bureau was probing whether Trump's campaign coordinated with Russia during the 2016 race. After the encounter, Coates discussed the conversation with other officials and decided that intervening with Comey, as Trump had suggested, would be inappropriate, according to officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive internal matters. So I'm not sure where the illegality lies. The president can say anything he wants, but it's not obstruction of justice unless he actively does something to obstruct justice. And if I went to Dan Coates and I said, Dan, I'd appreciate if you dropped this investigation, it wouldn't mean anything. If the president does it, it doesn't really mean anything either. Maybe it's a backdoor sort of pressure, but it's not obvious that that is pressure rising to the level of obstruction of justice. Is it just possible that Trump is so annoyed with the Trump-Russia investigation because he himself knows that he's innocent, that he's saying off-the-cuff silly things to people? My theory is that that's what best fits with the evidence. Not that Trump is some sort of mastermind attempting in Nixonian fashion to quash the investigation, but that Trump is so frustrated with Comey and with the Trump-Russia investigation that he's angry at everyone. There's a report today that he's angry at Jeff Sessions. Okay, Jeff Sessions, of course, is his attorney general and one of the more solid kind of populist nationalists in the administration. If you are somebody who likes Trump's agenda, Jeff Sessions is your man. I mean, Jeff Sessions is the guy who is anti-immigration. Jeff Sessions is the guy who is in favor of harsher restrictions on immigration and harsher enforcement of crime. Jeff Sessions is somebody you want to see stay, in other words, if you are a fan of Trump. But now there's tension between Trump and Sessions, apparently. According to ABC News, Justice Department spokesperson Sarah Isker Flores would not comment when asked by ABC News if Sessions had threatened or offered to resign. Additionally, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer yesterday would not confirm whether Trump still has confidence in Sessions, saying, I said I have not had a discussion with him on the question. I don't. If I haven't had a discussion about a subject, I tend not to speak about it, which is a pretty weird way of answering a question about whether the president has confidence in his own attorney general, sort of this language that was being mirrored by Sean Spicer before Comey was fired. So clearly there's tension between Sessions and Trump. So in other words, Trump is angry at everyone that the Trump-Russia investigation won't just die, not because he's guilty, but because Trump thinks he's innocent. Trump says, I didn't do anything. I know I didn't do anything. And that's really plausible that Trump didn't do anything. Even if Paul Manafort, his former campaign manager, did something. Even if Carter Page, his former foreign policy advisor, did something. Even if Mike Flynn did something. That is not evidence that Trump himself did something. And you can sense that Trump has a divide in his own mind between the Trump campaign and Trump himself. And by the way, if you're Mike Flynn and you were cutting some sort of corrupt deal with the Russians, or Paul Manafort and you were cutting some sort of corrupt deal with the Russians, the last person you would tell is Donald Trump. For two reasons. One, Trump would likely fire you. And two, even if Trump didn't fire you, you're now making him privy, well, three reasons. Two, you're making him privy to information that could get him impeached if he ever was discovered to have been involved in this. And three, if you tell Trump, there's a good shot that Trump will say something dumb about it on national TV and get everybody in trouble. So the reality here is that Trump probably is innocent, Trump probably is irritated, and Trump probably is going around saying to everyone he can find, can you please stop this because it's annoying me? That, I think, is the account that best fits with the evidence, but that's not what Democrats are saying. I'm going to get to that in just a second. The over-the-skis nature of this, the Democrats really pushing a narrative that doesn't exist, a narrative that is far over the top, and they're going to continue pushing it, and it's up to Trump how to tamp that down. There's a way for him to do it. We'll talk about that in a second. But first, I want to talk about our advertisers over at Realty Shares. So if you're somebody who's interested in investing in real estate, but you've never really looked into investing in real estate, you think you don't have enough money to invest in real estate, Realty Shares is the place for you. What they do is they actually diversify investments, big investments, among people who are smaller investors. It is not an offering of securities. Private investments are highly illiquid and risky and not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Securities offered to accredited investors through North Capital Private Securities member FINRA SIPC. But RealityShares.com is demolishing the walls between you and real estate investing. You don't need billions or millions or even tens of thousands of bucks to invest in vetted real estate assets. With Realty Shares, hundreds of people invest fractionally, right? You reduce the cost of your initial investment. Their deals are vetted. They are curated by industry professionals. They underwrite and perform due diligence. So you don't have to source these investment opportunities yourself. You have to waste all your time doing that. Instead, you basically have a list of investments in which you can take part, and then you go to Realty Shares and you invest. It is free to sign up and browse the investments. Getting set up takes just a few minutes, and then you can manage and invest straight from your phone or computer through their simple and secure online process. All it takes is $5,000 to make an investment. There are no hidden fees. And look, listen, if you want to build wealth, there is no better way to do it than investing in real estate. If you make $200,000 a year, you may qualify. Find out today at realtyshares.com/Ben. That's realtyshares.com/Ben. And by the way, if you use realtyshares.com/Ben, REALTY shares.com/Ben, then you get $100 toward your first investment. Close to 100,000 investors nationwide are using Realty Shares. $60 million in principal has been returned to investors. Realty Shares works, and again, it is the best way for you to diversify your holdings, and you want to make sure that you comply with all the restrictions, and then you should definitely become an investor in Realty Shares. Go today to realtyshares.com/Ben. Again, $100 toward your first investment is what you get. REALTY shares.com/Ben. Okay, so the fact is that the Democrats are trying to overread the situation. The Democrats are going with the Trump was colluding, now Trump is covering it up. And you can see the people who they are trotting out to say things like this. So the first person they're trotting out is James Clapper. James Clapper was the director of national intelligence under Barack Obama. He was appointed by Obama. And Clapper is not an honest person. He's the person who lied in front of Congress when he said that people were not being surveilled, essentially, by the National Security Agency. That was not true. Now James Clapper was doing a speech to the National Press Club in Australia, and here is what he had to say about the Trump administration.
His subsequent actions, sharing sensitive intelligence with the Russians and compromising its source, reflect either ignorance or disrespect, and either is very problematic. Similarly, the whole episode with the firing of Jim Comey, a distinguished public servant, apart from the egregious, inexcusable manner in which it was conducted, reflect complete disregard for the independence and autonomy of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, our premier law enforcement organization. I have to say,
and so pause it right there for a second. When he says that it reflects a lack of respect for the autonomy of the FBI, what he is implying there is that Trump is invading the autonomy of the FBI, meaning that he is attempting to cram down his view of the Trump-Russia investigation on the FBI. No evidence has been provided of that. Trump has every right to fire James Comey, who was, is, and will be an incompetent, bloviating blowhard. Here is James Clapper continuing.
Though that I think, compare the two, that Watergate pales, really, in my view, compared to what we're confronting now.
Okay, that's insane. Watergate does not pale in comparison for two reasons. One, there was an underlying crime in Watergate. We know there was a break-in at the Watergate Hotel. We know that it was subordinates of President Nixon who conducted that break-in, and we know that President Nixon attempted to cover it up, obstruct justice, and fire people. Here, we don't know that there was an underlying crime. Here, we don't know that Trump was actually trying to obstruct when he fired Comey. And there's been, by all the available actual evidence that we've seen, no one can provide a shred of evidence other than accusations that there's been an actual attempt to shut down the investigation. In fact, the people who are key, people like Rod Rosenstein, people like Rogers, people like DNI Coates, all of these people have said there is no actual intervention into the Trump-Russia investigation. So how can he sit there and claim this is worse than Watergate? How can he claim that? He can't, because he's a political hack. But again, I just want to point out that if you're on the left, what you need in order to keep this thing alive is you need more smoke. So the left will push its smoke. But what you really need if you're the left is you need Trump to continue to fulminate. You need Trump to continue to get angry and tweet things, because the more Trump tweets, the more he fulminates, the more he acts out, the more he asks people to shut down investigations, the more he tells people, can you please leave this alone? The more irritated Trump gets, the more volatile he gets. The more volatile he gets, the more he tends to say innately not smart things to people about an investigation that may not be obstruction of justice, but that give hints of obstruction of justice if you're a member of the left. So the best thing that Trump can do right now is to take it easy. That'd be the best thing that Trump can do. And I'm going to talk about what exactly Trump can do to tamp all this down. He's, I think, starting to do some of this, but he's going to need to not live tweet Comey's testimony tomorrow to do the rest. But in order for you to hear what the strategy ought to be and how Republicans are responding to all of this, you need to go over to dailywire.com right now and become a subscriber for $8 a month. You, too, can subscribe at dailywire.com. That monthly subscription will get you the rest of the Ben Shapiro Show live. You can be part of the mailbag, which we are going to be doing on Fridays. We're now a 5-day-a-week show. You're going to be contributing to our new studios. We have new studios that are going to be premiering next week. You know, we've been basically doing this from the inside, apparently, of a Russian dacha for the last year and a half. But we are going to actually be moving over to some beautiful new studios in the next few days, which is really, really exciting. You can be part of that as well over at dailywire.com. And if you become an annual subscriber right now, not only do you get all of those things, but you also get a free signed copy of the new book by me and my father, Say It's So, Papa, Dad, Me, and the 2005 Chicago White Sox championship season. You don't have to be a Chicago White Sox fan to enjoy the book. If you're a baseball fan, you will enjoy the book. It's a lot of fun. It's about fathers and sons. And what was a really tough year, actually, for my family. But my dad and I spent the year watching these baseball games and writing about it, and it was just a blast. And I think the book's a lot of fun to read. It's actually kind of moving, I think. Great Father's Day gift. Go over and become an annual subscriber right now over at dailywire.com. Get a free signed copy, and we'll send it direct to you, and you can give it to your pops. Really good present. So dailywire.com to become a subscriber, or if you just want to listen to the show later, go over to iTunes or SoundCloud, and make sure that you leave a review over at iTunes. We always appreciate it. This is the largest conservative podcast in the nation.